Gościem naszym jest Matteo Merzagory. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Fizyk, dziennikarz naukowy i popularyzator nauki, dyrektor naukowy ośrodka Traces oraz dyrektor Espace de Science Pierre-Gilles de Gennes we Francji. Prowadzi zajęcia z tematyki komunikacji naukowej oraz roli nauki w społeczeństwie na uniwersytetach we Francji i we Włoszech. I wygłosi wykład inauguracyjny. Zapraszam. So, the floor is yours.
Okay. Oh, the slides are up. Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really very, very happy to be here for a long series of reasons. I will not tell them all, but I will tell there some. One is Copernicus, which is, I work since now 25 years in the field of science centers and museums, and Copernicus is a reference for many reasons of the new way of thinking the role of a science center in a major city. And in particular for one reason that I'd like to underline, that there has been here a lot of investment on people, which is a very, very important thing. And this was from the beginning. I remember hearing conferences, a lot of science centers invest in big architectures, enormous multimedia stuff. It's not that this architecture is bad. But alongside to that, here there was a lot of investment on the people on the floor, on explainers, on the people that generate the knowledge. And the very fact that now Copernicus starts this walk becoming not only a science sharing place, but also a science producing place, I think is once again a sign of the way this place is able to interpret the key issues that are today. When I was proposed to come to this conference, I was already very interested, and then I read what was the main tagline, the main ideas behind this conference, and I cannot find more appropriate and well thought topic today. And the title of my talk is very close to what is the topic of the whole conference. And so this is, I'm just telling you that what you're talking about here is, I think, what is really important to talk about everywhere in the world when we cross science and education today. So, Ivona, thank you for presenting. You already said everything about myself. I just like to underline the fact that even if I am a teacher of science communication, I'm not an academic researcher. What I said, I try to say it always from the practitioner point of view, of somebody who does things in a small science center in Paris. Before I start the actual content of my talk, I'd like to show a series of quotes of one of the persons that most influenced my way of thinking, my way of looking at reality, which could be like most of my talk is already there. Because you can find the entire cosmos lurking in its least remarkable object, this capacity to look at how many interesting things are inside everything that is around us. Here I changed the word, but scientists, if they are genuine, must keep repeating, I don't know. The value of being able of saying I don't know, and ignorance as the main driving force for curiosity is also there. It's just not easy to explain to someone else what you don't understand yourself. I think that everybody that started teaching know that, you pretend you know, you don't. But it's a very difficult situation that we all know, and also very fascinating. And then any knowledge that doesn't lead to new questions quickly dies out. It fails to maintain the temperature required for sustaining life. This is a beautiful way to say how much it is important that any question becomes a new question. And then that all the best spirit have in common is a regard for reality and agreement to its primacy over the imagination, the importance of reality, of what the world really is behind the word that we said is also another very, very important thing. Do everyone in the room know which scientist said these words? No? Does anybody has other ideas? So it's one of the persons that most influenced me, and it's Wisława Szymborska, who's reading, I think it's... I'm not kidding. When people come to me and say, well, what should I read in order to understand what is the issues in science communication, science popularization, I point to this book. It's a wonderful way to discover well, you know Szymborska. Okay. I don't go behind that, and I'm very happy. Unfortunately, in France, this is not translated, and is not very well translated. In Italian, I'm from Italy actually, it's very well translated. The whole work of Szymborska was translated, so we can enjoy that, I hope, soon also in France. If you have any possibility to push publishers and so on, just do it, because it's a pity that France cannot enjoy that. Okay. First part of my talk, I'd like to give a bit of context and then go to examples. For going into context, I'd like to start from Frank Oppenheimer. As some of you know, Frank Oppenheimer was the founder of the Exploratorium Science Center in San Francisco. We say the first one of the modern science centers. There is never a first one. Everybody steps on the shoulder of the others. But he was quite a visionary mind. And I'd like to start with a little story. Many of you might already know it. It's quite well known. Frank Oppenheimer used to say this story about the moment of greatest satisfaction for him. And he says the moment in which I was more happy in my life, and this was back in '69, is when an old lady came to me and after visiting the Exploratorium and said, you know, Mr. Oppenheimer, I really need to thank you. I thank you because after visiting your center, I was able to go back to my home and change the little plug of the lamp that is next to my bed that I was never able to change. So why was Oppenheimer so happy and so satisfied of this old lady? It's because in its center there was nothing, but really nothing, that explained how to change the plug of a lamp. What he taught to this lady was not how to change the plug of a lamp, was telling her, you can do it. And this was the experience that he was able to deliver. And this, I think, is at the essence of all our work. And in writing, he says in this word, is the meaning of science and science education at the same time. If people feel they understand the world around them, or probably even if they have the conviction that they could understand it if they wanted to, then, and only then, they are also able to feel that they can make a difference through their decisions and activities. This is a sort of a political, in the most noble sense, vision of science and science education. That I think it's a sentence that I personally try to keep all the time in mind whenever we plan an activity. A person who was working with Frank Oppenheimer was Bob Semper, head of education for a long time at Exploratorium, and he wrote a wonderful article on Curator, which is a scientific journal for museum people. I read just a passage of that. I think you could have after my slides, so if you need, I have no problem in sharing. We are now witnessing, he was writing this in 2007, things have gone very, very fast. We are witnessing a fundamental change in the educational landscape. There are connectivity tools, like smartphones, the internet, etc., and the new social opportunity that they offer allow people the control to choose when, where, and from whom they select their learning opportunities. There is the issue of access of information has completely been changed by these devices. And not only we should think now about a learner-centered type of education, but the education becomes what he calls de-institutionalized, because the learner can choose not only what to learn, but also when, where, and from whom. And this can take place anytime, and we lose the possibility to define when, where, what, and from whom people should learn. This is very challenging, it's very scary for some reasons, but absolutely interesting. And he's also gone on saying that we should now think of learner not just as students in school, but active participants in an environment made up of, I don't read it here in my screen, but it's school, museums, media, and I think you can read it, right? So, the institutionalization of education is another topic that we should take in mind. The third thing I wanted to talk about very quickly is changes that are occurring also inside science. So not only inside the educational world, but also inside science. Just, I play this very quickly. How many people here have a background in biology? Okay, so, or some knowledge in biology. Okay, so please don't talk now. I'd like to know how many of you know the name of this, how many of you know what it is? How many know what it is? Okay, very good. I guess most of you also know what it is, its function. Yes. How many of you know the names of these guys? How many of you could name them? Okay, quite a few. Not the biology ones, of course, because this is so these are the bases, these are DNA. Now, let's look at this picture. How many of you can tell the names, not the biologists, huh? How many of you can tell the names of these people? Of all three of them? None. So now is the time for biologists. How many of you biologists, can you tell the other people who these three persons are? There is 1, 2. Okay. Normally nobody knows. Here we are in a very, very knowledge place. So who are these people? Right. So these three people are, Bill Clinton, I think you recognize them. On its right, he's Craig Venter, the leader of cellular genomics, and on his left hand is Francis Collins, who was the head of the Human Genome Project and actually head of the NIH, the National Health Institute. What is interesting for me is that I often in my courses play these two slides, and even in many type of conferences, and most of the time, 10 times more people or so, like it was the case here, know the names of them and completely ignore the name of them. Which I think tells a lot. Yeah, I'm staying here. It's okay. Perfect. I think it's an interesting indication on how we conceive science and its role. These three people there in 2000, they were announcing the sequencing of the human genome. It was the largest investment in science ever, more than CERN. Space Station, CERN, the particle accelerator in Geneva, and Human Genome Project, the biggest things. And the Human Genome Project is difficult to count, but it's the biggest probably. These people were, there was a tough competition to get it there. Francis Collins from the public consortium of the Human Genome Project and Craig Venter from a private company betting on the speed of computers that he would say, I now sequence it randomly, then the computer will do the job in 10 years' time, and I'll be faster than you. And at a certain moment, he was winning the race. So they decided to call the political institution, Bill Clinton, to go in the media and to publish the same day on Nature and Science, the two main scientific magazines in the UK and in the United States, to publish at the same time just to stop the race and make but this could be done only on TV, only by a political representative like Bill Clinton. And in this picture is a very rich picture because is it interesting or not to know that Francis Collins is a born-again Christian? So a fundamentalist American Christian movement, the born-again Christians. And is it interesting or not to know that Craig Venter is a scientist but also an entrepreneur? who came from the California 69ers, surfer, garage, Bill Gates type of, or Steve Jobs type of spirit. Is it interesting or not? We don't know. But what we can say is that now the picture of science is much more like the one on your right than the one on your left. And we could ask ourselves, why are we teaching the name of adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosines, and not the name of Francis Collins, Bill Clinton, and Craig Venter? There might be good reasons. I am not defending one point or the other. The name that we give to this situation is post-academic science. So I say it in one sentence. There is a wonderful book about it by John Ziman, a British sociologist and physicist. It's the key decisions governing science today are not taken only by institutions to whom we gave this role. They are taken by a negotiation through a very high number of actors, which includes religion, culture, advertising, politics, the media, which all participate in the key decision governing science, not in scientific truth, which is a different thing, but in the decision that decide what we look and research. So, to put things together, we are now in a situation which is we could call post-academic science, in which there is a big mixture of many different points of view and actors that drive science. We are in a situation of the institutionalization of education, in which the new media and the way that people use and the way they socialize through the new media must change the way we refer to the institutional education. There is no way out. We need to take this into account. And so we can ask ourselves about the quotes of Oppenheimer that I said at the beginning. Are they still true? Are they still actual? How can we reactualize them, rethink about them? And so I'd like to give you a vision of one element, which is the topic of this conference, that for me it's very important to take into account. We need to try to go out of this black and white vision, for which there is on one side knowledge production, and on the other side, knowledge sharing. There is an idea of first we know, then we tell other people what we know. This, for those of you who did some scientific work, is of course not true in science. You learn while sharing. A scientific conference is a place of production of knowledge. It's not only a place in which you share. If you think of what happened in science centers and museums, most of the time, we invite scientists because of what they know, and we invite the public because of what it doesn't know. And we are stuck into this system. Whenever we invite a scientist, it's because he knows something, and whenever we say a member to the public, come to the science center, it's because he doesn't know something. This is a big contradiction. Scientists spend most of their time being interested by what they don't know. Isn't it true for the scientists here? They're not interested in what you already know, except when you go and meet the public. Then you become an expert, which is not a scientist, which is not a researcher, at least. I don't go into the details of this, but there is a big contradiction there that we need to solve. And this is because we think of these two moments as completely separate moments, in which there is scientists, research centers, scientific journals on one side, and on the other, the public, the media. And the black one comes first and the white one comes second. What I'm trying to say is that there is a gray zone, a gray area in between, which is exactly what you are exploring here, which is the most interesting area for science communication and science education, is where the two things are not so clear, in which scientists maybe are there also because they don't know something and they find it in the contact with the public, in the exchange with other actors that places like schools, science centers, etc. can organize. And that's why they come, not because they know. And the public does not come only because I know nothing, let's go there and listen to what they tell me, but because they have something to say, they have something to bring, which might be an opinion, which might be a sensation. Everybody has his knowledge, which is its own, but let's value it. And I think education, also formal education, can teach a lot about that. So second part of my talk, I'd like to go into some examples. Szymborska said one of the beautiful things about Szymborska is this way of trying to always change the point of view a little, always looking things at a surprising angle. And so what I'd like to do in the next part, in the last 15 minutes or so, try not to talk really about science education, but personal observations that I see around, that I like to share with you, that for me are very relevant to science education. And I'd like, in the 15 minutes that we will have to exchange, and also in the 2 next day, I will be very happy to exchange and to discuss about this. So the examples, I will take them from completely different fields, like music, economy, and so on. Then from the informal, I like the fact that, let's stop with these artificial barriers between formal and informal. There is not such things as two separate words. But in any case, from science museum, science center, etc., and then from education. So to start from examples which are completely from other world. One is PJ Harvey. I know that Victor Gajewski went to see this because we met in a previous conference where I... And so why I find this interesting is not the result. The album is not the best one of PJ Harvey, who's a quite well-known rock singer. Her last album was recorded entirely with the public as spectator. So the recording was done in front of the public. So it was not a live album. It was not that the album was conceived before and then presented to an audience. It was recorded and so crafted with the audience participating. So what it is, it was an art performance because it was in an art space. Maybe it was a concert, but maybe it was just a recording. Maybe it's just a communication tool, of course. But what she wants to do is sell her records. So it was a nice idea to make me let you know who PJ Harvey is. Maybe she sells a couple of records. So it's like, or maybe it was also an element of co-construction or a mutual benefits between the public. In any case, what's happening here? Like, we are in the gray zone. We are blurring the frontier of what is the moment of production and the moment of sharing, which is, in any case, interesting. What's happening here? This is the typical Brazilian barbershop, and many cultures have the same. Some goes more toward the coffee. I don't know well enough Polish culture to know where are these. This is a place. What's happening there is governance of the city, basically, under cover of cutting hairs. Is the place in which values, priorities are discussed, and at local level, at small level, it's where negotiation occurs, is where information is sharing. So somebody says that the Brazilian barbershop is the ancestor, the precursor of what now we call third places. Places that in which the moment of work, of leisure, of our homework get mixed. There are people that are exploiting this commercially. I put it lightly because so they are making money out of the fact they don't sell coffee, Starbucks, and so on. They sell Wi-Fi connection. They sell tables, meeting spaces, under cover of selling coffees. I'm not defending Starbucks as a vision of the future, but I think it's something we should really look at very, very carefully. People today work more and more in these type of spaces in which they mix the professional, leisure, cultural, and these are popping up everywhere in the world. I like very much the work of an architect, designer, Egelman. You see this. How many stairs that goes to a monument are in fact actually not stairs, but places to rest, places to eat, places to read, places to change. So by just putting these little tables there, he just tells us, watch out, people are doing with what they find different things from what they were originally thought. And I would like to come to this at the conclusion. These were stairs to access a pathway. They became now in most squares in the world places to meet, to eat, to rest. And so he did a sort of organization of that to demonstrate this. And I think it's a very interesting designer type of insight. Let's go to communication. This was the first page of Time in 2006, I think, 5 or 6, I might be wrong, in which, you know that Time magazine every year put the picture of a person who's the person of the year, which could be from Nelson Mandela, I don't know if Lech Walesa was there, but, you know, this type of people that make, you know, symbolically represent changes. And in this year, they said the person of the year is you. It was the beginning of the Web 2.0. It was the beginning of a communication form that is oriented toward a participation of the user. The reader is also a producer. Everyone is a broadcaster. There was many slogans that went to it. I think it's also very important to take into account that communication has completely changed. I remember very clearly, 15 years ago, the idea that people could freely comment on a paper was seen as something, they would just say stupid things. But you need to filter everything. Now I think there is no single newspaper in the, the well-educated part of the developed part of the world, at least, that doesn't have a commentary on it. You know, you are surprised if you read an article and you cannot put your comment on it. Not to the contrary. So things have changed very, very fast in communication. And that's also something that I think science education should really reflect. I will go quickly on that functional economy. The idea that you don't sell products now anymore, you sell the function of the product more and more. There are examples in music, examples in transportations, examples in tourism. Is another observation point that I think it's rather important. Up to the point that people talk about a mix, again, this gray zone between production and sharing, producing and consuming becomes a bit of the same way. I think a very nice example is Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, an entrepreneur, South African, the guy who did PayPal, the system. Then he made so much money that he could do whatever he wanted. And what he did is develop a car, the electric car, which will probably revolutionize the car parks everywhere. But at the same time, the company Solar City, who develops solar cells and renewable energy, solar energy. And I think this is very interesting also to observe, because what he does is, in order for solar energy to become an interesting solution, it needs a storage system. It needs a system that makes the balance when there is no sun, and that stores the energy when there is sun and gives it back when there is no sun. When there is no sun, when it's night, when you use your car during the day. So during the night, the car can become a very efficient system for storing electric energy. And so, is the car a transportation system or an energy storage system? Both. And the moment we accept that whenever you are a stair or a car, you're not just a car, a transportation system, but you can also be something else, you probably have a key to success, in this case, commercial success. Once again, I'm not defending this guy. I think it's interesting to look what he's doing there. So let's go into the field of culture, of science communication. What's happening in science centers and museums? I have not yet visited Copernicus since 5 years now, so it might be changed, but the fact that the participation of the public is always there is something. This is from Science Museum, Natural History Museum in London. This is from Science Gallery in Dublin. Museums and science centers now have always a place in which people can express themselves. They read the Time Person of the Year. They know that people have ways of expressing themselves. This can be the post-it, is the easiest way, which is also something we see a lot in participatory democracy and so on. I will not go into that. It can be comments on other people post-it. It can be dialogues that starts occurring between visitors. It can be exhibitions such as the Museum of Broken Relationships, I don't know if anybody have heard of that. It was born in Zagreb, and now it's turning all around the world. It's about broken relationships. The museum is people that brought an object that talks about the end of a relationship, and they tell the story. And the museum is the collection of these objects. And it's a beautiful museum, very touchy. And you have all kind of broken relationship, from very hard and deep things to the very, I saw him or her one day and then never anymore. The Science Museum London has conceived an exhibition about pain. Most of the exhibition was done together with patients that have problems of pain. So the participation of the public comes at the very production of the exhibition. This is an exhibition we did at our place about science and humor, and it was entirely crowdsourced. So we opened the exhibition completely empty, and we asked people to bring, if you have ever visited a science laboratory, you have seen that on the lab door or on the physicists or biologist offices, there is always jokes about biology. So we told, just take all them and put it in the exhibition space. So the entire exhibition was produced by the public, so it's a kind of an extreme. There is another tendency which is called the living lab. It comes from the open innovation world, but actually is now entering very, very strongly the cultural spaces. So places, you can see them as a research lab which is open to perturbation that comes from the public, from the interaction with other actor system. So you make the lab and you make it as perturbated as possible, as crossed as possible. Or you can see it as an exhibition space which try to produce research. I will not go into that. I think Malvine Artaud, who is here tonight, will... she's a human library, and she's very... she has studied in depth this issue through a French project called Meędzy. So I think in order to finish in time, I will skip a bit. But just to say, it's our places in which, as I was saying at the beginning, are we producing new knowledge? Are we sharing the knowledge with others? It's really impossible to say. Science Gallery made a series of exhibitions which are called Science Galleries in Dublin, which are called Lab in the Gallery. This one, for example, was a very interesting one. A researcher had to do a research on memory, short-term, long-term memory under different conditions of stress. What he would have done in a classical system is find 1,000 volunteers that would come to his lab, sit down, answer to questions to a computer, provide him data that then he would publish. He said, why these 1,000 people, why do not I get them from the public of an exhibition? They come there, they answer under the strict scientific control all the questions, and when they get out, we explain them why they did what they did, why we are interested in them. It's another very interesting concept in which you don't know if you go to an exhibition because you are producing or sharing the knowledge. All this goes into the fast-growing citizen science movement. You might have heard of Foldit. It's the first video games who published articles in Nature because they study the way proteins fold. A very complicated task for those of you who knows, and they found that it's much more efficient to have several thousand gamers that play a game, and they find better solution than organized, structured scientific procedure. And they did publish quite a lot of paper. Sorry, just to, I don't know the reaction, we can discuss this later. We are not saying that this should substitute science. We are observing that this is happening. And of course, most of the science remains directed, remain institutional, but this is also happening. As all the biodiversity contributions, there is no single comet that has been discovered by scientists in the last years. It's all discovered by amateur. Because it's uninteresting for science. and so it doesn't happen. It happens by amateur. It's, in any case, an interesting discussion, an interesting observation, and something to think about, with all the dangers that it has. Biodiversity monitoring is very often done through programs which are at the same time collecting data and engaging people in science. So I gave examples from many different fields. I think Science Gallery was able, this science center I was talking about before, to summarize it in one sentence which I like very much. What they do in Science Gallery, they say, we don't propose science, but interesting, unusual, challenging interpretation of the world. Isn't this a very good definition of science and of education at the same time? I think so. What about formal education? I have a few minutes left. There are cases like, I showed you this before, power given to the people. Do we believe it? Not much. And also, this means that the moment in which we get the responsibility of communication, we get also a lot of responsibility, which maybe is not up to teacher, neither to scientists, to take this. So it's an issue that it's very challenging. There are examples. I will just go to examples and maybe get to this later. You might have heard of this paper who was published by a primary school children who did, and it is quite very quoted. They did a study on bees, on the way they orient themselves, as good as to become actual research work. There are people, like in France, the Centre de Recherche Indisciplinaire, who put up a program, Les Aventuriers, in order to have what is called learning and teaching by research. Through research projects, they do all their teaching. Everything in contact between school teachers and research scientists. These are extremely interesting examples. But I do believe that are a problem. They are quite anecdotal. You see always the same 4 or 5 examples that are quoted, and they use non-renewable energies. It means that they rest on one teacher who is in one moment of his life is extremely energetic, creative. He has time, he or she has time, and so on. This will not produce change. You need to be able to find ways to help teacher being more intertwined with research, sustainable. So that even when in your average day you can do something. If you only do the things, this paper will not be repeated by that teacher. It's once in a lifetime. So what was the use of it? And so what my conclusion is that what really counts is not really the knowledge that we produce that makes us in this interesting gray zone, but the relationship with knowledge that we are able to produce in our students and children. We use this 4-keyword progression to define that. Access, motivation, ownership, and empowerment. Unless you go down this ladder, there is something missing to the knowledge, and I will fast conclude on that. Access means, from the student point of view, can I know? Today, I think is almost a non-issue in most of urban and developed world, at least. If you want to know, you can know. But then why should you know? Why should what the teacher or the educator tell me should be interesting for me? Do we spend enough time on that? And then there is the next step, which is ownership. Am I a spectator of knowledge, or am I getting the knowledge and making it something that it's mine then? I think also in our own experience, many times, maybe you in this moment, we are just spectator of knowledge. This is only half the way through the work. And the last one is what I started with Frank Oppenheimer, which is called empowerment, which is what would I do with that knowledge? And here there is a very big issue, because most of the time we have no idea what our students and our visitors would do with the knowledge we provide them. We do the best we can. We think that they will do the same thing as we have done. So we have become teachers, we have become scientists, we have become museum educators. Normally we use that. But most of the people that come with us, they do different things with that knowledge, which are maybe completely unexpected. There is a sociologist from Brazil who called it, the public is an hacker of scientific knowledge. They hack it, they do it something which becomes completely different. He's Yuri Castelfranchi, his name. Examples of this way of doing, I know that it opened also in Copernicus, is the tinkering studio approach. Places in which you are just everyday materials, you just tackle scientific issues by a creative and making type of activities called open-ended inquiry-based learning. The key issue there is that people are free to choose what to learn. So this is typically a non-school type of activity, but from which, once again, I think we have a lot of things to learn. Sometimes giving up the way of controlling what people learn can be challenging, but also very interesting and very rewarding. The basic idea is to build curiosity and appetite for learning through personally meaningful. Remember the quote of Szymborska that I put, that we always combine personal and objective. And this space, if you want to go and see it, I think is wonderful for that. There is one activity that we do, is called In the Brain of a Teenager. I will not describe the whole activity, just the idea is teenagers are mostly interested in one thing, themselves. In particular, their brain, the changes that occurs there. So let's make research projects that are led by students, teenagers, about how can I answer a good question to my brain. The steps are formulating personally relevant, as the one I was telling before, questions. So questions that matter to them. Then designing an experimental protocol, and then and only then meeting scientists. I think we are exploring this. For us it's very important. Knowledge comes at midway, established knowledge, not at the beginning. Because at the beginning, if it happens at the beginning, they will remain spectator. First, they define the relevance. They find out that they have questions. They find out that there are ways to answer the questions that maybe are completely wrong. But only then somebody tells them that it was probably already studied or not interesting, and not at the beginning. I think this makes a complete, huge difference. And then they execute an experiment and they do an exhibition with their results, and this is very interesting. I think I will skip that because I'm late. I just want to go to the conclusion. This is intergenerational dialogue. I just quote this example, which is an European project in which we are involved. The key issue is how do you bring all that into the classroom? We tried with this project, which is going by himself, to take into account these issues that you see there, and to provide it in 3 different formats, which we call lesson sequences and projects, which can adapt to the energy of the teacher in that moment. Lessons are ways to tackle things like should we ban cola because of the sugar content of it, which is a real issue, about climate change, about the fact that nutritional property of insects. But maybe you have just 1 hour to devote to that. Maybe you have a part of your program. Maybe you have an whole year that you want to devote to one topic. So the idea of this project is to provide content to tackle contemporary research in its making, together with scientists, taking into account the way science is presented in the media, but adapting to the timing and the energy that a teacher can have at a certain moment. So I just advise you to go there. I'd like to end, because otherwise I eat up my timing. I like to have some discussion with 2 summary conclusions that we developed in another European project. So my view is that science is mainly a tool by which young people can design a world as similar as possible to the one they would like to live in. We cannot be active actors of our future, and I heard similar description before, so I'm very happy that this resonates very well. You cannot be an active citizen of tomorrow if you don't understand and if you don't have this empowerment with science that Oppenheimer was talking about in '69. Mastering science is a key element if you want to be an actor for the future. Is this the way students perceive science? Not much, normally. And I think this is one of the key issues that we should tackle. And the second thing is that we often try to concentrate too much on what people learn and not on what will happen with that learning, which we will never control, but which we can accompany and master. The fact of allowing people more freedom to do whatever they want with their learning is a way to transform them from pure learner and spectator to also co-producer of knowledge at their level. We are not saying that they are doing science. I hope this was clear. I think that's it. So we have 10 minutes for discussion. I like very much the quote of Jean Bosca on your right. How beautiful is the world around us, how much there is to understand still. And teaching science in all languages, I think it's a wonderful idea. So thank you very much, and I hope there is we have 15 minutes of potential discussion. Thank you.
Zachęcam zatem do zadania pytania.
There is one up there. I think there was a reaction there I'd like to discuss.
But it will be in English.
I think I can answer without being up for everybody to hear. But I'm not sure if it translates. I might have to use my... Hello, Jakub Bochiński here from Copernicus Science Center. I work for the education lab here. The question that I have for you is, I really enjoyed the fact that you mentioned that some of the most interesting projects that utilize research projects at school provide mostly only the kind of anecdotal evidence, and they require a lot, and I mean a lot of energy, and very keen teachers that are very well represented here surrounding us, and they took part in a lot of projects like that with us, with Copernicus, and generally in Poland as well. You also showed one of the projects, the Engage project, that I suppose should help teachers take part in such projects utilizing slightly less energy. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about this project and similar projects, and also if there is any suggestion you would make regarding a more structural change that would allow us to run such projects on a scale of, well, the entire educational system, if possible? Sorry, I know it's a bit of a challenge.
No, thank you. Well, one of the things that you should do, best advice, is come to conference like this. I'm very keen to learn here and go to Copernicus Science Center, which is a place in which these issues were really, seen in advance with respect to others. So you're in the right place to learn about advices on how you do that. In our analysis during this project Engage is that many times the advices are of two types. Recipes and I don't remember how we called them, and enthusiasm arising examples. None of them really works because the answer is in the diversity, clearly. So whenever you go to conferences, like you see TED Talks about education and you see, wow, this is so fantastic, these children are great, and then you go back to your desk and you say, oh, come on, how can I do it? Or you have little recipes that you're supposed to apply them and you see that actually nothing changes after application. So the idea is for me, the best is to provide scalable type of support that can help the teacher whenever he needs it. It's called just in time, So if there was in France a big discussion about solar autoroute, so the effect of equipping of solar system, the autoroute, big discussion, or maybe there were some teachers that wanted to tackle this and to take this into account, but how do I find the scientists that can come to my class and talk? How do I find reliable information without spending several days? So provide them with this just-in-time type of information. On the other hand, don't take out independence of teachers. You know, I might be wrong, but the teacher I know are very often quite allergic to recipes because they always know better than recipe. You know how things work. So whenever you find things which are too coded, you just say, okay, well, what to use? So the fact of understanding that there are several types of teachers, and the same teachers is different in different moments of his life. It's the most important things. There is also a big change in attitude from the scientific community, which needs to be provoked. What I mean by that is, I come from this community. I work with them very often. Everybody is really open, really willing to help sharing their knowledge and so on. But too often, we make them believe that this time is lost time. And I say we, meaning we, is not the institution. They often say, okay, but then, you know, I have to publish or perish, and my institution don't allow me to spend time on this. They don't reward me for that time, so why should I do it? But, okay, this is an organizational, institutional problem. We could address it, but I think we have a responsibility. Whenever we ask them to come and be only information providers and not building situations in which they will be satisfied by this encounter, they will find interesting in input. They find interesting input from the fact of engaging in education. Until we build this type of activities, we fail. Examples. In the Living Lab system, they might be very interesting to meet a designer, an entrepreneur, or an artist, because they open up new ways of thinking, new way of seeing their own problem, mostly in the applied sciences, but not only. So why not, while having them as experts that bring in knowledge, organize a situation in which they will be people that learn something. Scientists love to learn, love to discover new things. Let's organize them a situation in which they see a professional interest in being in contact with the public. Then they will be engaged. Then it will be easier to have them also in the classroom, also with students. But if you just put scientists there in front of a group of students talking, at the 10th time they do it, except a few examples, they get bored, they stop. So there is also this educational aspect toward the scientific community that I think needs to be done. Well, I don't know if I answered. Maybe I stop there if there are other questions. Yes.
I would like to point out another aspect of the blurring of science and public information and so on. I think it's also dangerous because we get Dr. Google being as important as scientific authorities. There is no sort of evaluation of information. I'm not saying that every page in the internet should have accepted by or accredited, but it's something we have the benefits. I mean, someone can find out enough about the solar system to talk to a scientist, but he can also find a lot of junk, and this is not graded. I'm afraid of this.
Sorry?
I just said that what you find on the internet is mostly junk.
A lot of it, yes.
Also.
What you find in the internet is possibly junk. I think we should already make the difference. What you find in the internet and what make an impact on the students. It's not one-to-one.
Junk makes the impact on the student that's
It is of course a problem. I don't think personally, but this is I'm not an expert on the subject, but I don't think that for this element, the exposure to junk information, the internet made a real Copernican revolution, a real shift. We expose more and more the public to unfiltered information. And this is since Gutenberg. It's a continuous evolution of the way people can get in contact with information that we don't control more and more. And this is happening since first it was completely controlled information, then the press made many copies of books that we don't know. You know, the writers don't, when he was writing one book, he knew where it was, that book, and who would have used it. Right now, we publish books that we don't know in whose hand will go already. The internet progressed on this. What we did with school, we taught students how to read a book, what is a publisher, now we are teaching students how to read the internet. The internet is full of junk and it's full of wonderful opportunities, wonderful, great type of information. Wikipedia is not full of junk. There is some junk in Wikipedia, but most of the information, my wife used Wikipedia for calculation on theoretical physics because it's the most accurate function-solving repository that there is. She's a professor in physics. You cannot doubt that she does. There is a lot of very valuable information there. Yeah, we need some direction, but I would say that whenever we tell the students that they should do as we teach them, we fail. They have a different use of information, as my parents had a different use of information that I have. They need to live on that. They need to read Szymborska and understand that decrypting the word is in every moment of your life that you do it, I think. But I think this is a big question. But any type of censorship or desire of control information from an older generation for a newer generation, I think is very, very unsuccessful. Unsuccessful. No control of the information from older to younger. The opposite would be interesting to do it.
Of course, in this part of the word censorship raises a very completely different association than probably in your part of the world, but let's leave it aside. I just want to make a small comment about the one essential thing we should teach is a critical assessment of the information available. And let me give you an example from yesterday. Yesterday, BBC published that the Australian Scientometric Institution had published a paper about the assessment of the quality of 3,597 papers, if I recall correctly, in genomics. And out of them, 20% had a fundamental flaw, which came from the use of the Excel. Because the Excel spreadsheet has a built-in a flaw in identifying the name of one of the genes, right, with the date. That means that all the statistics done in these research papers are completely useless. Another example of the lack of the critical assessment. About a half year ago, CERN published a preliminary data from LHC about so-called diphoton bump. It's irrelevant what it was. As soon as it was published, about 500 research papers were published, mostly in these papers you mentioned, Nature and Science. By the way, Nature is this journal which published most of this scientific fraud in the history of scientific literature. So the 500 research paper was published, including I don't know how many thousands comments and posts in the social media. About a month ago, CERN said that was a mistake. There was no phenomenon whatsoever. If we are not critically assessing the information, if we follow the media, as particularly social media, way of spreading information, then we are running straight ahead toward a huge disaster. Like Elon Musk with the Tesla, an accident caused by autopilot on a Tesla. There are increasing number of people who get injured by the use of the probable flow in a program of the autopilot in the Tesla car. There are serious, people get killed. It's not that, I mean, if somebody publishes wrong scientific papers, it's, well, that's nothing. But if you get killed by the car driven by the wrong program, that's, at least for those who get killed, it's a serious problem.
I don't think I just completely agree that critical thinking. I hope it was clear that all my. But I agree. But the point of critical thinking is how do we promote it? And I think there is also quite a difference from what you say. You're talking about training good scientists, but there are people that will never do it, and their critical thinking might be slightly different. But this is
I don't think there is such a kind of a creature of science. There are only humans.
No, they are professional. They are people paid by the state to be scientists. So this defines them, scientists.
But if I believe your talk, there should be only the citizen scientists, not the professionals. You said that there is a growing field. Well, anyway.
Yeah, it's I hope that it was clear. What I'm trying to do is point out to things that are happening, so that we cannot deny, and that we should not just disregard as crap, but as interesting evolution of the world, to look at them critically. That's for sure. But I think there is a lot of excellent citizen science happening. And the opening up of knowledge to non-academical produced knowledge is a very healthy thing that is happening to science.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.